There will be a war when you put $90 billion in the pocket of the largest terror sponsor on earth. You are asking for and you are guaranteeing war. The Iranians and their terror proxies will wage war against Israel and against the Sunni Arab states all over the Middle East, thanks to the money that the Biden administration is now putting in their pockets.
The meaning of unbreakable alliance is to stop the nuclear bomb of Iran by stopping this unfruitful negotiation for the nuclear deal. This is not deal. You just give up. You are giving up. And we are calling you as your good friends that admire you as the 51st star on the American flag, which is Israel. We call you, stop the Iranian bomb.
Jewish lives matter! Jewish lives matter! Jewish lives matter! Jewish lives matter!
We oppose completely the signing of the agreement with the Iranians, this evil regime that has said once again and again that they want to annihilate the state of Israel. The Iranians have been building a huge force around Israel with hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles, and they have a clear aspiration to be a nuclear power. The agreement we're talking about here is an agreement that will ensure at the end of the day that the Iranians will have nuclear capabilities, and we know that once this happens, they will use it against the state of Israel, or they will use it as an umbrella in order to operate hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles and drones against the state of Israel. This is an existential threat for the people of Israel. We cannot agree to such an agreement. Now, this agreement also means that the sanctions that have been imposed on the Iranian people will be relieved. And we have to understand, once these sanctions are relieved, the money will be used to bring munition and capabilities to all the militias of the Iranian forces.
Mr. Biden, you betray your true enemy, Israel. Mr. Biden, we demand to you to block the Iranian deal.
Do you remember 9/11? Do you remember? Because the Iranian bomb will be thousands worse. Thousands of people will die in Israel because America decided to collaborate with Iran. Our lives matter, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Shame on you! 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 Shame on you!
Shame! 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 Shame!
In Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Gaza, they have managed to build a huge force even with sanctions. So imagine what they will do once there is no agreement, and once they can take billions of dollars and invest them in more missiles and in more rockets and in more drones. At the end of the day, if this agreement is signed, I can say as a general that it's true that in 1 year or two, Israel will have to face a huge war in the Middle East.
And as we see all over history, if you don't stop hatred, then hatred will stop you. We must move and go head on against evil, because history will not charge harshly those who did their wrongdoings, but those who did know about it and did nothing.
One of our worst enemies, you intend to approve nuclear abilities to terrorists, to an entity, to a country which resides terrorists, which supports Hamas and other terror organizations.
The Trump administration adopted a policy of maximum pressure against the Iranians. They empowered their allies, first and foremost Israel, to stand up to Iranian aggression all over the region. And second of all, they placed crippling sanctions on the Iranians. By using crippling sanctions, now if they think it's going to work against Russia, which has an economy that's much larger than Iran's, then know that was working against Iran. Which means what? Which means that it isn't that they think that this is the only way to handle Iran. It means that they don't care about Jewish lives.
Now Iran is a country that has global aspirations. They are operating in Africa. They are operating in South America, endangering US in their background. How can it be that a country that endangers the safety of the world is a country that the West is willing to deal with and give money and sign an agreement that means that in a few years this country will be nuclear? This is an existential threat. Israel won't agree to such a scenario, and unfortunately we are left alone to take care of our future, and we'll have to fight and win this war even without the West.
And here in Israel, Jewish lives matter. And Israel exists to make sure that even people like you realize that our lives are valuable, they're not worthless. And we will fight. And we will block you. And we will undermine your plans to give nuclear bombs and $90 billion to the mullahs. We will stop you at every place you stop. We will scream and we will yell and we will fight for our country. Against you too, because you're enabling all of this. You're facilitating all of this. This is your policy. Your policy to put nuclear arms in the hands of the ayatollahs. It is your policy to enable and indeed guarantee that they will wage war against the Jewish people in our state, and we won't stand for it.
We call you to wake up, to see that if you will not stop evil, then evil will win you, as it was always during history.